I was sitting at my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the endless spreadsheets that defined my life as an urban planner. It was a typical Tuesday morning, until it wasn't. The envelope, stark white and unassuming, appeared on my desk between one sip and the next. No return address, just my name, Morgan, scrawled in a hurried hand. Curiosity piqued. I tore it open, expecting maybe an anonymous complaint or some unsolicited advice about city zoning. Instead, I found photographs. My heart plummeted as I recognized Caleb, my husband, wrapped around Serena, my best friend. They were laughing, sharing a moment that was meant to be private, meant to be ours. The room spun, and I gripped the edge of my desk to steady myself. My name is Morgan, and I thought I had it all figured out. A stable job, a loving husband, and a best friend who felt like family. But life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, the images searing into my mind. I was supposed to be resilient, analytical, someone who could sort through chaos and find order. But this was a mess I never anticipated. By the time I got home, I had replayed 1,000 scenarios in my head, each one more painful than the last. Caleb was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. The smell of his famous chili filled the room, but it turned my stomach. I watched him for a moment, trying to reconcile the man I saw in the photos with the man in front of me. He looked up, his smile faltering as he caught my expression. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. I tossed the envelope onto the counter. "Found this at work today." His eyes flicked to the photos, and I saw the color drain from his face. For a moment, I thought he might faint. Instead, he shook his head, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "Morgan, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because it looks like you and Serena have been busy." He opened his mouth, closed it again. I could see the wheels turning, trying to find the right words to say. "It's complicated," he finally managed. "Complicated?" I echoed, incredulous. "That's all you've got." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I swear it's not what you think. Serena and I were just what, Caleb?" I cut him off. "Friends? Because I don't have friends who do that." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. "I love you, Morgan. You know that, right?" I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to the life I thought we had. But the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. "I don't know anything anymore," I said, my voice breaking. We stood there, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. I could feel the weight of his fear, his desperation to hold on to the life we'd built. But I was driven by something else, a need for truth, for clarity. I needed to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Finally, I turned away, unable to look at him. "I need some time to think." I left him standing in the kitchen, the chili forgotten, the air thick with unspoken words. As I walked away, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, confusion, a deep sense of loss. But beneath it all, a spark of determination ignited. I would find out the truth, no matter what it took. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the confrontation over and over, searching for any hint of sincerity in Caleb's words. But all I found were more questions. How long had this been going on? Why Serena? And most importantly, who had sent the photos? As sleep finally claimed me, I resolved to get to the bottom of it. I would confront Serena, dig deeper, and uncover the truth. Because this wasn't just about betrayal, it was about justice. And I was going to make sure that everyone got what they deserved. The next day would be the beginning of a journey I never asked for, but one I was determined to see through. I spent the next morning in a daze, the events of the previous night swirling around my mind like a storm I couldn't escape. The photos haunted me, and Caleb's flimsy explanations only added to my confusion. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of it all. That someone was Owen. Owen and I had been friends for years. He was the kind of person who could see through the noise and get to the heart of things. I texted him, asking if we could meet for coffee. His reply was immediate and reassuring. I found myself at our usual cafe, nursing a cappuccino and waiting for him to arrive. When he walked in, his presence was like a bomb. He gave me a quick hug, his warmth cutting through the chill that had settled in my bones. "Morgan, what's going on?" he asked, concern etched in his features. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I found out Caleb's been having an affair. With Serena." Owen's eyes widened, and I saw the shock ripple through him. "Serena? Are you sure?" I nodded, sliding the envelope across the table. He glanced at the photos, his expression darkening. "I can't believe this. How long?" "I don't know," I admitted, frustration creeping into my tone. But I need to find out. Owen leaned back, his gaze steady. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet. Caleb's denying it, of course. But I can't just let this go. He nodded, understanding without me having to say more. You know I'm here for you, whatever you need. His support was a lifeline, and I felt a flicker of hope in the midst of my turmoil. Thanks, Owen. I don't know where to start. He reached across the table, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. You'll figure it out. And if you need help, you've got me. As we talked, I noticed a change in Owen, a subtle shift in the way he looked at me. There was something deeper in his eyes, something that hinted at more than friendship. It was a glimpse of a possibility I hadn't considered, but now wasn't the time to explore it. Meanwhile, Caleb and Serena were carrying on as if nothing had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their affair, something beneath the surface that I hadn't yet uncovered. It was infuriating, the way they rationalized their actions, as if their betrayal was somehow justified. That afternoon, I decided to confront Serena. I needed to see her face, hear her side of things, even if it meant ripping open the wound a little wider. I walked into her boutique, the bell above the door chiming my arrival. She looked up from the counter, her smile faltering when she saw me. Morgan, hey, she said, her voice too bright, too forced. Serena, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Can we talk? She hesitated, glancing around the empty store. Sure, what's up? I cut to the chase. I know about you and Caleb. Her face went pale, and I saw the mask slip, just for a moment. Morgan, Save it, I interrupted, my anger bubbling to the surface. I just want to know why. She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. It's complicated, she said, echoing Caleb's pathetic excuse. Try me. She sighed, a hint of frustration in her voice. It just happened, okay? We didn't mean for it to go this far. I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. That's supposed to make it better? No, I'm sorry, Morgan. I never wanted to hurt you. Her apology felt hollow, and I knew there was more she wasn't saying. But I also knew I wasn't going to get the truth from her. Not now, maybe not ever. I guess that makes two of us, I said, turning to leave. As I walked away, I felt the weight of her gaze on my back. I knew this was only the beginning of a long, painful journey. But I also knew I wasn't alone. With Owen's support, I was determined to uncover the truth and find a way to rebuild my life. The cracks in the foundation of my world were deepening, but I wasn't going to let them break me. Not yet. The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and unease. Caleb and I existed in a tense silence, each of us tiptoeing around the other, careful not to disturb the fragile peace. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, and I could feel it growing stronger with each passing moment. I spent hours combing through our shared life, looking for clues, for anything that might give me the answers I needed. It was during one of these late-night searches that I stumbled upon a phone I didn't recognize, tucked away in the back of Caleb's desk drawer. My heart pounded as I powered it on, my hands trembling with a mix of fear and anticipation. The messages were there, plain as day. Conversations between Caleb and Serena that left no room for doubt. They spoke in a language of intimacy and deceit that made my skin crawl. I felt a hot flush of anger and betrayal, my hands shaking as I scrolled through their words, each message a dagger to my heart. I couldn't stay in the house, not with the walls closing in around me. I grabbed my coat and slipped out into the night, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. I found myself at Naomi's door, my neighbor and friend, hoping for some clarity, some way to make sense of the chaos. Naomi opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to concern as she took in my disheveled state. Morgan, what's happened? She asked, ushering me inside. I handed her the phone, unable to speak. She took it, her eyes widening as she read through the messages. Oh, Morgan, she said softly, her voice filled with empathy. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Everything feels like it's falling apart. Naomi sat beside me, her presence a comforting anchor. You're stronger than you think, she said, her words a balm to my fractured spirit. But you don't have to go through this alone. Her support was a lifeline, and I clung to it, drawing strength from her unwavering belief in me. But even as I sat there, I knew I couldn't keep running. I had to face this head-on, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning, I called Caleb, asking him to meet me at the park. I needed to confront him, to hear his side of things once more, even if it meant tearing open the wound all over again. He arrived, looking worn and weary, the weight of his deceit etched into his features. Morgan, he said, his voice tentative. I handed him the phone, watching as realization dawned on his face. I found this, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me. He looked up, a mixture of guilt and resignation in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, the words falling flat between us. Why Caleb? I asked, my voice breaking. Why Serena? He hesitated, searching for the right words. I don't know, he admitted. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to get this far. That's not good enough, I replied, my anger simmering beneath the surface. You've shattered everything we built. For what? His silence spoke volumes, and I realized that maybe he didn't have an answer. Maybe there was no justification for what he'd done. As we stood there, the tension between us palpable, I felt a shift within myself. The need for revenge, for justice, was still there, but it was evolving into something more, a desire for closure, for peace. I didn't want to be consumed by this betrayal. I wanted to reclaim my life, to find a way forward that didn't involve being defined by Caleb's actions. Just as I thought our conversation was drawing to a close, Caleb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to one of panic. I have to go, he said abruptly, turning to leave. Caleb, wait. I called after him, but he was already walking away, his retreating figure a reminder of the distance that had grown between us. I watched him go, a new determination taking root within me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. There were still questions that needed answers, truths that needed to be uncovered. And I was going to find them, no matter what it took. As I walked away from the park, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles and challenges I couldn't yet see. But I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to face whatever came next. The days after my confrontation with Caleb were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between the urge for revenge and the need to maintain some semblance of dignity. I knew that I couldn't just sit back and let this betrayal define me. I needed to take control of the situation, but how? I confided in Owen again, meeting him at a quiet corner of the park where we could speak freely. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine, offering a silent promise of support. Morgan, you're handling this better than anyone could expect, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. Am I? I asked, feeling the weight of my uncertainty. I'm just trying to figure out what's next. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Have you thought about what you really want out of this? Is it revenge or something else? His question lingered in the air, forcing me to confront my own motivations. I realized I didn't just want to hurt Caleb and Serena in return. I wanted to reclaim my life, to break free from the shadow of their betrayal. But how could I do that without losing myself in the process? As we talked, Owen's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing. It's Naomi, he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. She says it's urgent. I felt a flicker of apprehension. Naomi was the kind of person who didn't panic easily, so if she said it was urgent, it probably was. We made our way to her house, my mind racing with possibilities. Naomi greeted us at the door, her expression serious. Morgan, I found something, she said, leading us to her kitchen table. There, she had laid out a series of documents, each one more damning than the last. These are financial records, she explained. It looks like Caleb and Serena have been funneling money from your joint account into a business venture. My heart sank as I scanned the documents. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd realized. Caleb hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been siphoning off our savings to fund Serena's boutique. My hands trembled as I tried to process the enormity of it all. Why would they do this? I asked, more to myself than anyone else. Naomi shook her head, her eyes filled with sympathy. I don't know, but it's clear they've been planning this for a while. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave, threatening to pull me under. But instead of succumbing to despair, I felt a surge of determination. This was the turning point I needed. I couldn't just stand by and let them get away with it. Owen, I need your help, I said, my voice firm with resolve. We have to gather more evidence, something undeniable. He nodded, his expression resolute. Whatever you need, I'm here. Together, we devised a plan to gather the evidence needed to confront Caleb and Serena publicly. I knew I was treading dangerous waters, but I couldn't let them continue to manipulate and deceive me. This was about more than just revenge. It was about justice and reclaiming my life. As we left Naomi's house, I felt a shift within myself. The weight of my decisions was heavy, but I knew it was the only way forward. I had to take control, to protect not just my future, but also the truth. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events of the day in my mind. The betrayal, the lies, the financial deceit, it was all so much to bear. But I realized that I wasn't alone. With Owen and Naomi by my side, I had the strength to face whatever came next. The stakes had been raised, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. But I was ready to confront it all, to fight for the life I deserved. This wasn't just about Caleb and Serena anymore. It was about me, about finding my own way forward and emerging stronger on the other side. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to face whatever came next, and I wouldn't stop until I had the answers I needed. The community event loomed on the horizon, a ticking clock counting down to the moment I would expose Caleb and Serena for who they truly were. The plan Owen and I crafted was meticulous, each step designed to ensure that the truth would come to light. But as the day approached, I felt the pressure mounting, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me like a storm cloud ready to burst. I found myself pacing the living room, my mind racing with possibilities. What if something went wrong? What if Caleb and Serena managed to turn the tables on me? The uncertainty gnawed at me, threatening to unravel my resolve. Owen arrived, his presence a steadying force amidst the chaos. "Morgan, you look like you're about to jump out of your skin," he said, his tone light, but his eyes filled with concern. I can't shake the feeling that something's going to go wrong," I admitted, wringing my hands. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We've got this. You've done everything you can to prepare. Now it's just about seeing it through." His confidence was infectious, and I felt a flicker of hope reignite within me. But even as we reviewed the plan one last time, a nagging doubt lingered. Was this really the right path? Was exposing them in such a public way truly the justice I sought? Or was it simply revenge dressed up in the guise of righteousness? The day of the event arrived, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. The community center buzzed with activity, neighbors mingling and chatting, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit. I scanned the crowd, searching for Caleb and Serena, my heart pounding in anticipation. When they finally arrived, their smiles and easy demeanor made my stomach churn. They moved through the room, greeting friends and acquaintances, completely oblivious to the trap I had laid. I watched them, my emotions a tangled mix of anger, betrayal, and a lingering sadness for what could have been. As the time drew near, Owen and I exchanged a glance, a silent confirmation that we were ready to proceed. But just as I was about to step forward, Naomi appeared at my side, her expression urgent. "Morgan, we need to talk," she said, pulling me aside. "What is it?" I asked, my nerves fraying at the edges. "I overheard something," she said, her voice low. "Caleb's been telling people that you've been unstable, that you're making things up." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Caleb wasn't just trying to protect himself. He was actively working to undermine me, to paint me as the villain in this twisted narrative. Anger flared within me, but so did a renewed determination. I couldn't let him win, couldn't let him rewrite the truth. I returned to Owen, my resolve stronger than ever. "We're going through with it," I said, my voice steady. He nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. Together, we moved to the front of the room, drawing the attention of the crowd. My heart raced as I took a deep breath, ready to lay everything bare. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice carrying through the room. "There's something important I need to share." As I spoke, I felt a shift in the room, the air growing tense with anticipation. Caleb and Serena's expressions changed from curiosity to horror as they realized what was happening. I laid out the evidence, the photos, the financial records, each piece a nail in the coffin of their deceit. The room erupted in whispers and gasps, the weight of the truth crashing down like a tidal wave. Caleb tried to protest, his voice rising in desperation, but the evidence was irrefutable. Serena stood frozen, her charm and manipulation stripped away in the harsh light of reality. As I finished, I felt a sense of release, a burden lifted from my shoulders. But with it came a new understanding. This wasn't just about exposing them, it was about freeing myself, about reclaiming my narrative and moving forward on my own terms. The fallout was immediate, the crowd buzzing with shock and disbelief. But amidst the chaos, I felt a sense of clarity. I had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to build a new life from the wreckage. As the event wound down, Owen stood by my side, his presence a comforting anchor. "You did it," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "I did," I replied, feeling the truth of it resonate within me. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that I could weather any storm. The aftermath of the community event was a whirlwind. The truth was out, and Caleb and Serena were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered reputations. But as the dust settled, I found myself standing in the wreckage of my own life, unsure of what came next. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel was overshadowed by a hollow emptiness, a reminder of all that had been lost. I returned home, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Owen had offered to stay, to help me navigate the chaos, but I needed to be alone, to process everything that had happened. The weight of my decisions hung heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line, that in seeking justice, I'd lost a part of myself. The days blurred together, each one bringing new challenges. Caleb, desperate to salvage what remained of his life, began spreading rumors, painting me as the villain. Friends I thought I could trust started to distance themselves, their whispers echoing in the spaces where laughter once lived. I felt the walls closing in, the life I'd built crumbling around me. It was as if I'd been stripped bare, every vulnerability exposed for the world to see. I tried to focus on work, on the things I could control, but even that felt like a losing battle. My mind was a storm of doubt and regret, and I couldn't find my way through the chaos. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, a knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Naomi, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Morgan, we need to talk." I nodded, inviting her in. She took a seat across from me, her gaze steady. "I heard about Caleb's rumors," she said, her voice gentle. "You can't let him do this to you." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It feels like everything's falling apart." Naomi reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "You're stronger than you think. You've come this far, and you're not alone." Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit, but even as she spoke, I felt the weight of my decisions pressing down on me. I'd exposed Caleb and Serena, but at what cost? The lines between justice and revenge had blurred, and I wasn't sure where I stood anymore. As Naomi left, I realized that I needed to confront Caleb one last time, to try and find some semblance of closure. I called him, asking him to meet me at the park, the place where our lives had first collided in chaos. He arrived, his expression guarded, the charm that once captivated me now a distant memory. "Morgan," he said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "Caleb, we need to talk," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. He shrugged, his defensiveness a shield against the truth. "What's there to talk about? You've already made up your mind." "I didn't want this, Caleb," I said, my voice breaking. "I never wanted things to end like this." He laughed, a hollow sound that cut through the tension. "You think I did? You think I wanted to lose everything?" We stood there, the weight of our choices hanging between us. I could see the pain in his eyes, a reflection of my own, and for a moment, I wondered if things could have been different. But before I could speak, Caleb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to one of panic. "I have to go," he said abruptly, turning to leave. "Caleb, wait." I called after him, but he was already walking away, leaving me alone in the fading light. I watched him go, a sense of finality settling over me. The confrontation I'd hoped for had slipped through my fingers, leaving me with more questions than answers. But as I stood there, I realized that maybe the closure I sought wouldn't come from him. Maybe it had to come from within, from finding a way to forgive myself for the choices I'd made. The path ahead was uncertain, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I also knew that I couldn't let this define me. I had to find a way to rebuild, to reclaim my life and move forward, even if it meant starting from scratch. As I left the park, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that I could weather any storm. The air was thick with tension as I approached the boutique, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this was it, the moment I would confront Serena and finally lay everything bare. The truth was out in the open, but there were still pieces missing, threads that needed tying up before I could truly move on. As I entered, the bell above the door chimed, announcing my arrival. Serena looked up from the counter, her eyes widening in surprise. "Morgan," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Serena," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "We need to talk." She hesitated, glancing around the empty store before nodding. "All right," she said, gesturing for me to follow her to the back room. The small space was cluttered with boxes and merchandise, a stark contrast to the polished exterior she presented to the world. I could feel the weight of our shared history pressing down on me, the years of friendship tainted by betrayal. Serena crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "What do you want, Morgan?" "I want the truth," I said, meeting her gaze. "I know you manipulated Caleb, threatened him with something from his past." "Why?" She laughed, a brittle sound that echoed in the cramped room. "You think you know everything, don't you?" I know enough, I replied, refusing to back down. But I want to hear it from you. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, might try to spin another web of lies. But then her shoulders sagged, the fight leaving her. Fine, she said, her voice resigned. I did it. I told Caleb I'd reveal his secret if he didn't do what I wanted. Why? I asked, the question hanging between us like a challenge. Because I was tired of being second best, she snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. You had everything, Caleb, the perfect life. I wanted a piece of it. Her words cut deeper than I expected, the truth of them stinging like a fresh wound. But beneath the anger, I saw something else, a vulnerability, a fear of losing control. Serena, you didn't have to do this, I said, my voice softer now. We were friends. Were we? She shot back, bitterness lacing her words. Or was I just someone you kept around to make yourself feel better? The accusation hit hard, forcing me to confront the truth of our friendship. Had I taken her for granted, assumed she'd always be there without considering her own struggles? The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also brought clarity. I'm sorry, I said, the words surprising even me. I didn't see it, and I should have. She looked at me, surprise flickering across her face. You really mean that? I do, I replied, feeling the weight of my own mistakes. But it doesn't excuse what you did. She nodded, a flicker of regret crossing her features. I know. I didn't know how to stop once it started. We stood there, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. I realized that this confrontation wasn't about revenge or justice anymore. It was about understanding, about finding a way to move forward. Serena, what you did was wrong, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. But we can't change the past. All we can do is try to be better. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. I'll make it right, Morgan. I promise. As I left the boutique, I felt a sense of closure, a release from the anger that had consumed me for so long. The confrontation had brought me face to face with the core themes of my journey: betrayal, justice, and the possibility of redemption. I stepped out into the street, the sun warm on my face, and felt a flicker of hope for the future. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I knew I was ready to face it, armed with the knowledge that I could weather any storm. As I walked away, I realized that the greatest challenge wasn't confronting Serena or Caleb. It was confronting myself, my own fears and insecurities. And in doing so, I'd found a strength I never knew I had. The weeks following my confrontation with Serena were a time of quiet reflection and gradual healing. The storm that had upended my life was finally settling, leaving behind a landscape I was slowly learning to navigate. I found solace in routine, in the familiar rhythm of work and the small joys of everyday life. Owen was a constant presence, his support unwavering. We spent evenings talking about everything and nothing, our conversations a balm to my wounded heart. There was a warmth between us, a gentle understanding that hinted at something more. But for now, I was content to let it unfold naturally, without the pressure of defining it. One afternoon, as I was sorting through a box of old letters and mementos, I stumbled upon a letter in Caleb's handwriting. It was tucked away in a corner, forgotten amidst the chaos. My heart skipped a beat as I unfolded it, unsure of what I might find. The words were raw and unguarded, a glimpse into a side of Caleb I hadn't seen in a long time. He spoke of his regrets, his failures, and the weight of his insecurities. He admitted to feeling lost, to letting his fears drive him to betray the life we'd built together. But most importantly, he expressed a deep remorse, a wish for forgiveness. Not from me, but for himself. As I read, I felt a complex mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a surprising sense of empathy. The letter didn't excuse his actions, but it offered a window into his struggle, a reminder that we were all flawed, all capable of making mistakes. I folded the letter carefully, placing it back in the box. It was a reminder of the past, but it didn't define my future. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about absolving Caleb. It was about freeing myself from the burden of anger and resentment. It was about finding peace within, about allowing myself to move forward without the weight of the past holding me back. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Owen and I sat on the porch, the air warm and still. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice soft but filled with admiration. "I have," I replied, feeling the truth of it resonate within me. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm getting there." He nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You're stronger than you know, Morgan." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that settled comfortably in my heart. I looked at him, seeing the kindness in his eyes, the quiet strength that had been my anchor through the storm. "Thank you, Owen, for everything." We sat in companionable silence, the night wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace it. As we watched the stars blink into existence, I realized that my journey wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about finding my own path, about reclaiming my life and the person I wanted to be. I had faced betrayal and heartbreak, but I had also discovered resilience and compassion, not just for others, but for myself. The road ahead was open, filled with possibilities I was eager to explore. And while some questions remained unanswered, I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next. In the quiet of the evening, I felt a sense of closure, a peace that had eluded me for so long. The past was a part of me, but it didn't define me. I was free to write the next chapter of my life, to embrace new beginnings and the promise of what lay ahead. And as I sat there, surrounded by the warmth of friendship and the promise of tomorrow, I knew that I was finally home.